them, same thing that they're learning in the classroom. Now at home, they're going to run home, get on that computer, and do their homework without a parent having to ask them once.
10 seconds, Cheli. Who teaches the teachers how to use these things?
Good point. The teachers need to learn how to incorporate it within their lesson plans and within their curriculum in the schools. We can have outside companies come in. The school principal can be one that can assist teachers to teach them how to best incorporate this as another learning resource. This is just another learning resource that we bring into our classrooms as a supplement to enhancing education.
Cheli, Cerra. Cheli, thank you very much. Shots fired in a Washington State high school and a student is dead. Police say they have the killer, but that might be little comfort to the students wondering if they're really safe at their own school. So what can teachers and parents do to prevent this kind of tragedy in the future? Cheli Cerra is a school principal and a child success specialist. Cheli, a lot of kids hear about stuff like that and they start thinking, well, could that kind of thing happen at my school? What do you tell them if you're a parent? Because it could, couldn't it?
Absolutely. Parents need to keep lines of communication open and talk to their kids about how they're feeling. And schools need to also have the same venues for them to do so.
So communication is the key. I mean, you don't want to pretend like this kind of thing can't happen.
Well, you have to be proactive. Schools do have in place safety plans and crisis plans that they should share with parents and students. They have fire drills, safety drills, in case a tragedy like this should happen. But most importantly, we need to make sure that we have situations in place for children that feel that they are in crisis to reach out.
You know, I have a fairly broad age range among my kids, but my 10-year-old, she's a big question asker. She just goes on and on and on, and sometimes I just feel like, you know, I'm overloading her with information. Since I'm in the news business, I'm supposed to know it all. What do I tell her?
Right. Well, you need to keep it age appropriate. For instance, if she's 10, you're not going to go into graphic details with her. You're going to talk to her about her concerns and listen, and also talk to her in terms where she's going to understand. What we need to make sure is that kids that are in crisis, there are ways for them to reach out for help. Many kids that go and do these horrible things, they've been in crisis for a while. They've been bullied, harassed. Maybe no one's listened to their cries of help, and that's why this happens.
You talked about the schools being proactive. You know, you're a principal yourself, as we mentioned. How are we supposed to allow children to get an education without turning schools into armed fortresses with barbed wire and metal detectors everywhere?
Well, schools still are the safest places. Less than 1% of homicides have occurred in schools. Now, that is 1% too many, I agree. What we need to do is put curricular programs in place for kids to be able to handle stress and anger management issues. We also need to let kids know that they are safe in schools and provide avenues for them if they feel that they are being harassed or bullied, for them to immediately let an adult know so that it is immediately taken care of and it doesn't go another step further.
Are you aware of any common themes among the school shooters that we've seen in the last decade or so? I mean, is there any one thing that authorities, school administrators can point to and say, you know, that is something that school shooters exhibit?
Yes. Many times, many of the boys and girls within the school know that the action is going to take place. These are things that they plan, they initiate. It doesn't happen overnight. They are being bullied or harassed, or they feel that they are outcasts, and therefore they feel that they just don't belong in society. And because they have not gotten help, it turns to this. Now, parents also need to step up to the plate and be aware of what's going on with their children as well.
Cheli, Cerra, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See a pattern, one of those stories there. Look at online and on TV, attention going to the Miss USA story. You know, the Miss USA website says that the competitors are all, quote, savvy and goal-oriented women who seek to improve the lives of others. We found this, though, on another website. This is Miss Nevada playing tonsil hockey, competing now for the Miss USA title next year. Not exactly model behavior there. Cheli Cerra is with me, school principal and child success expert. What do you make of this when these pictures get out there?
Well, I make that parents have to be their child's role models, and they have to chaperone, set limits, and be watchful of what's going on.
Not only watchful, but everybody's watching now, Cheli. I mean, you think about technology these days. Tara Conner stood up there with Donald Trump 2 days ago and said, here we go with more tonsil hockey on TV. And got up there and said she did not realize how many people were watching her every move. Cell phone cameras, video on a cell phone. You've been warned.
Parents need to let kids know today that nothing is private, that they have to be very careful, especially if children are going to be going into the media or they're going to be doing things that are going to bring mass appeal into their lives. They have to be very careful of how they conduct themselves because it can come back to hurt them in the future.
You know what, I think about places like MySpace.com where the teenagers at a young age are doing their own profile online. All that stuff can come back to bite you later in life when you're trying to look for a job because employers can go back and find that. Have you thought about that?
Yes, it totally can, and that's why it's very important for parents to use these opportunities as lessons. They need to talk to their kids and listen to what they have to say and kind of guide them in the right direction. There's some shocking statistics out there.
Yeah. Cheli, go ahead. I don't want to stop you there. Go ahead. Finish that.
No, there's some shocking statistics,
like
and
what?
Parents need to keep a watchful eye on their kids. Well, when I did some research with my staff, we found that kids start drinking at the age of 13, and that leads into a life later on of adulthood if drug and alcohol, if parents aren't monitoring what they're doing. So they have to be on top of what's going on.
A lesson learned for a lot of folks. Sometimes too late, too, unfortunately. Cheli, Cerra, thank you for your time in Miami.
Thanks.
Well, here's some food for thought, we could say. Ever try concentrating on your work when you're really, really hungry, you haven't had lunch, you try to ignore your hunger pains? It's hard to do when your stomach is growling. Well, the same goes for students. In some high schools, though, the lunch period is, you might say, moving to the back of the class. Kids are not really taking time to eat because their class schedule is so crammed. Cheli Cerra is a school principal in Miami, Florida, and joins us now. Cheli, you know, one recent article that was written about this, the teacher said that she was so concerned about these kids because they just weren't concentrating. She couldn't quite figure out why. They'd get to her class and would be tired, couldn't focus. How big of a problem is it, and is it widespread?
It is a big problem, especially when you're talking about children that are in high school. The competition is fierce to get into college. You have state tests going, and they're going to skip lunch if the teacher offers them extra tutoring or extracurricular activities to enhance their academic day. My concern is that 25 million of our children are overweight already, and if they're skipping lunch, this leads to overeating candy bars and junk food to compensate for that healthy nutrition they should be getting.
Yeah, I suppose that, you know, the tendency is to just grab something quick as you're running into your class or your science lab or something like that. And does it have to be a full lunch period? I mean, would there be a way to work it out in kids' days these days where they could do it for 20 minutes, something like that?
Well, actually, according to the American Diabetic Association, 20 minutes of a lunch period is enough for a child to get a healthy, nutritious meal. Now, schools need to look at ways to offer this before school, after school, maybe even on Saturdays, so that children definitely need to have lunch. They should not cut into the child's lunch. In fact, type 2 diabetes in our children has increased 10 times over the last 10 years. So this also contributes to our children not eating.
You know, Cheli, one principal in New York, they have a system in his school where once a week, usually they'll have a science lab and they miss their lunch. And he said he's been there for 7 years, never had a complaint about it, that students just doesn't seem to bother them.
Well, you have peer pressure, you have competition, you have competitiveness, and children, you know, they might conversate amongst each others, but they won't go to the administration to say. And this is something that parents have to keep in mind, you know, be on top of your child and make sure that they're eating healthy every single day.
You know, what other people might say is that this is preparing those kids for the real world of when the competition is very intense in college and onto the workplace, and a lot of people just don't have time for lunch in the workplace these days.
That's unfortunate, and that's why our society is not as healthy as it should be.
Cheli Cerra,
so we need to make sure.
Is a school principal in Miami. Sorry for the satellite delay there, Cheli. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
3 deadly school shooting incidents in just 2 weeks, not to mention close to a dozen school lockdowns. Yesterday on Studio B, one Wisconsin lawmaker said arming teachers is the answer to school safety.
No way is this a proposal that they'd be openly displaying guns, wearing them on their hips. I would think that in the schools what will happen is they'll be under lock and key. That way it'll be safe, and you'd only go and get it if there was an armed intruder. I've heard a variety of different things, and that we would have protocols in place so that they'd only get that gun out in case of armed intruder where they're trying to hurt our kids, and they could defend themselves and the children in the schools. Otherwise, kids are just a sitting duck.
Teachers packing heat. Seriously. Joining us now, Cheli Cerra, school principal and child success expert. And your gut reaction to teachers with guns?
Absolutely not. No way.
I mean, well, you've got to have all options on the table, do you not? I mean, I know it seems extreme, Cheli, but don't you at least have to look at pretty much everything because school violence seems to be on the rise again?
Again, it is, but we need to be proactive and not reactive. And by having teachers carry guns or having guns available in the school, we are being reactive. What we need to do is form partnerships, educate, and communicate.
What about the other theory? What about the Flight 93 theory, Cheli, that says that we should teach teachers and teach students to fight back, to, in fact, gang up on some kid or some gunman who walks into their school? It seems like a fair assessment to me.
It is not. School should be a place for learning, and learning, it needs to stay that way.
Well, sure, but the learning tends to stop, Cheli, when a guy walks in with a gun. The learning stops right there, and these kids that may lose their lives, it would seem to me that an effective way to maintain or keep their lives would be to fight back. If the kids had fought back in Columbine, some might still be alive today. Instead, they just sat there and they prayed, and certainly, you know, it seems to me that all options in this case should be looked at.
We need to be proactive. We need to establish a partnership. We need to have parent patrols. We need to have staff walking the hallways, safety checks for any visitor that comes on campus. Those are things that need to be done. Security clearance, and also having people in the community helping the schools. That's the only way that we're going to try and stop these terrible things.
I think everybody agrees with that. I think everybody says there should be a lot more diligence looking at the schools and how to protect them. My question is kind of based on once somebody gets inside the school, and clearly it's happening more recently now than it has in the past 10 years or past 7 years since Columbine. It's happening now. What do we do? What do we teach the teachers once somebody gets inside?
Great question. We need to have a safety plan, and that safety plan needs to be conveyed to the students, the staff, and the community. Is your school safe? I have a safety checklist on my website, which is eduville.com. And what that means is that there are certain things that you need to do to ensure safety from within and also from coming in from the outside.
Are we as a country kind of overreacting to all of these shootings? I mean, considering the fact that really the odds of being shot in school are still 1 in 6 million. The odds of being hit and killed by lightning are much better than being shot in school. So do we need to take a step back and say, okay, well, let's look at this, but let's look at this earnestly and let's look at this thing reasonably?
Statistically, schools are still the safest places for our children, but there is a problem in this country, and what we need to do is educate, like I said, and communicate. We need to have programs for students who are going through some emotional problems that we can immediately take care of those needs. We need to have parents alert the school if they get some kind of a message that something is going to happen. Teachers, community leaders also need to step in and help the schools and help those principals come up with a safety plan.
Cheli, Cerra. Cheli, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.